Big Salaams. What's up, brothers and sisters? How you guys doing? We back with Big Salaams. We here. We got a very special guest. Alhamdulillah. Very, very special guest. And we're going to be talking about sacred activism, the Nafs spirituality, and his new book as well. Also, in many great things. But without further ado, let me give a big salams to our distinguished guest, Imam Dawud Walid. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. How you doing today?
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. It's a pleasure being on.
Alhamdulillah. So just to give you guys a quick rundown of the Sheikh himself, Sheikh Walid has studied under qualified Islamic scholars, learning various disciplines of Islamic law. That's fiqh, prophetic narrations, the hadith, the sciences of tafsir, receiving many ijazat in several texts as well. He has a degree in elementary education. He was affiliated with CARE. Are you still the executive director for the Michigan chapter?
Yeah, I'm still CARE, Michigan ED, yes.
Mashallah. He's also on the advisory board of Muslim Endorsement Council, which is a national endorsement and support organization for Islamic chaplaincy. Imam Dawud also was formerly served in the U.S. Navy, so you can be Muslim and still have ties to America, contrary to popular belief, right? He has very distinguished. He has the Marine Corps Achievement Medals and working underneath Administrative Officer and Command Judge Advocate General, JAG. Oh, so that's what that stands for. I remember the TV show back in the day. And mashallah, last but not least, which is, you could say, his legacy, he's authored many books, including many different topics, including Fatwa, which is Islamic chivalry, raising males into sacred manhood, blackness in Islam, racism, and many more. So, yeah, Sheikh, just to get straight into the topic, what makes someone, we're talking about sacred activism, right? It takes me back to a conversation I had with my cousin. Now, he's not Muslim, but he lived in the Bay for some time. He worked in tech. And I remember an older black gentleman told him, he said, listen, the issue with you young guys is y'all not thinking radical enough, right? So, of course, like an older black man in his 50s or 60s, probably 30 years ago, was active in the 70s, especially if he's from the Bay, right? In a more, you could say, active, radical type of way when it comes to racism and things of that nature. However, we as Muslims, we have etiquette, we have fiqh, right? We have these laws that abide us, the spiritual laws and things of that nature. So what makes someone an activist? Like, who is an activist? What is activism?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad al-Fatih lima ughliq, wa khat lima sabaq, nasib al-haq bil-haq, wa hadi ila siratillahi mustaqim, wa ala alihi haqqa qadrihi al-azim, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-azim. So in regards to what you stated, activism, and sometimes people overlap or confuse organizing or community organizing with activism. But in essence, someone who's involved in activism is basically out in society, involved in and joining good and forbidding evil around a particular issue or a set of particular issues. Enjoining good is more proactive, while forbidding evil is more reactive. So, in a nutshell, it's the activity, like it's being active, like it's embedded in it, but it's not something that is passive. But being an activist, as you mentioned, and the uncle used the term radical. Well, it depends on how we define the term radical. I think for my parent generation, the term radicalism would be more aligned with neo-Marxism, we could say, right? It's something that is somewhat irreverent, and the speaking truth to power is by any means necessary. And I don't mean the way that our beloved Malcolm X, Rahimullah Ta'ala, used it, in which, he had adab and etiquettes and was informed by worship of the creator, of the one who created the heavens and the earth and anything in between, but more so about the ends justifying the means. So obviously, for us, when we're talking about activism and radicalism, we would not take what some people would call a radical tradition to mean by this any worldly means necessary in order to achieve a worldly goal. Because ultimately, our ultimate goal is not the objective of activism in and of itself. Our actual our objective, or what is maqsood, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's like He's our ultimate aim and his felicity is our ultimate desire.
So with that being said, right, how would you describe the current state of activism as of 2026? What does that look like now?
Well, we have a very polarized country, and unfortunately, amongst Muslims here in the United States of America, we also have a level of polarization, right? And we have people who call themselves progressives. I won't use the word liberals, but progressives, that then those who go further to the left is one type of activism. And many Muslims have bought into that framework of what activism looks like based upon a series of platform issues that have been made almost, we could say, quasi holy, right? And then we have the reaction of that which is on the right, that's more than right of center, in which we have Muslims who have embraced a lot of right wing elements. And that tends more so to be some of the brothers in our community. And we can even say that the there's a connection between right-wing sensibilities and social political activism and the so-called manosphere. Like there's a conjoining between so-called manosphere, red pill, where people's, Shaykh is Andrew Tate and their is late Kevin Samuels, if we want to use Sufi language. and and you can see that many people's politics, that have gone more to the right, also would align with that, type of understanding or maybe misunderstanding of masculinity, right? So that's kind of where we're at today. I don't see too many people involved in activism in our community that are taking the moderate middle path, and by that I mean within the hudud of the sacred law, of not going too far to the right nor too far of the left within the sacred law, and also embracing the Islamic ethical paradigm that is informed to us by Ihsan, or what we call the science of tasawwuf, right? I don't see that much in activism circles these days. And people, by the way, I'm saying this not to say that I have it perfected, right? But, you know, we take our brothers and sisters that are involved in community work, and we take them for being sincere. We have husnul dhan and give them the benefit of the doubt. Giving people husnul dhan doesn't mean that uh, their priorities and how they're doing their activism is in accordance with the Sharia, the sacred law, right? So it's not an either or proposition. And one of my late teachers, my late ustad, may Allah have mercy on his soul, I've told this story often, but back in the late 90s, he looked me in my eyes one day and he said, Dawood, remember, you can be sincere and be sincerely wrong. So sincerity is not enough, right? Being sincere about a cause is not enough. We need education, we need tarbiyah, and we need to constantly check in with uh, with people who are elders in knowledge and age, and to take mashura, or to take consultation with people of of specialty knowledge of certain issues on the ground, but also sacred knowledge. And sacred knowledge takes precedence over the knowledge of a specialty of facts on the ground, like civil rights law or things like that. The sacred law takes precedence. But
Allah.
both are important, for instance.
For your ustad, may Allah have mercy on his soul. I mean,
I
that
mean,
statement, I mean, this is one of the blessings, and this is one reason why I agree that this sacred law takes precedent, because that ability to look you in your eye, that basira, to tell you something like that stuck with you, and you end up working in the field that deals with law and ethics and things of that nature, right? Where, yeah, you can be sincere, but it's better, you have to have facts too, and you have to know what you're doing. You have to have a proper method. And that's a great segue, because the question I was going to follow up with was like, how has the current world informed modern day politics? And you've hit that on the head, right? It's a lot of miscombobulation of these social ideas that have been engineered into society, whether through social media or these influencers, just things that are just weird, right? And very strange and not Islamic, right? But we have a lot of Muslims who defend it. But it's almost like, well, how did we get to that point, right? So, as we get to that, I guess, in fiqh, right? We've learned activism fi lughatan, right? We've learned it in a language. Now the istilahan, like, or what we're about to learn it in the context of Islam. How would you define sacred activism, and how can people even go about learning what that is, right? Because a lot of people who may be watching this may have never heard of what is a tasawwuf, what is a muqaddim, what is any of these things, right?
Yes. So when I wrote the book Towards Sacred Activism, which the second edition is out now, it was more designed to be a primer or introductory guide in which there are classes that I built that go along with the actual book. But you hit on the dot. Like in Islamic disciplines, there's a lughawi or linguistic definition, an istihlahi or shari'i definition. Or we could say there's a linguistic and operational definition, right? So all things in Islamic sciences, studying usul fiqh or any science, you have linguistics, and then you actually have the applied definition in practice, right? So this is important because being Muslim doesn't mean that one's activism is rooted in the sacred, like this work of being out in society, right? And definitions are very important. So the word that's commonly used for sacred in the Arabic language linguistically would be harma, right? Harma with a hard ha. Ha, ra, mim, tamabuta. So there's a well-known hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that said, "El mu'minu adamu harmatin min al-Kaaba," that the believer in his magnificence or her magnificence in grandeur is more sacred than the Kaaba, right? So it's the word harma. And by the way, if we even internalize that one hadith, we would treat each other much, much better as Muslims, and we wouldn't be involved in slander. We wouldn't be, we wouldn't be involved in qadh and defamation of character, and also, the whole fake inshallah Muslim thing where someone comes to us and say, "Oh, brothers, will you do such and such? Will you show up?" "Oh, inshallah, Shaykh," and they have no intention on showing up, right? So if we just understood that one hadith better, our community would be so much more beautiful. And we have a beautiful community, but it'd be so much more beautiful, right? So harma, that's the linguistics. So just to paint a picture for the audience, harma is sacred, and the most sacred masjid, which I just got back from a little over a week ago, El Masjid Haram, which is in Mecca, right? So haram is also is related to this word sacred, about the inviolability of not stepping outside certain parameters. And there's a haram, El Masjid Haram. The area surrounding that's called the haram, the sacred precincts. In the sacred precincts, a person's supposed to have a heightened consciousness of what they're supposed to do and a greater sense or awareness of what they should stay away from, right? So this sacredness and these boundaries are not set by democracy. They're not set by feelings. The one who made a Masjid al-Haram sacred and set the boundaries for the Haram is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So when we talk about sacred activism, it is operating in these boundaries in regards to the ends that we're trying to get to and the means that we're trying to use, that both of those are in accordance with the sacred law revealed to Al-Habib al-Mustafa Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alayhi wasallam, and seeking to implement those according to good traits of character that we were taught, not just in word, but by deed, by Al-Habib al-Mustafa alayhi salam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised him for his model and example in the Quran. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. Right? Allah said that we have given you in the messenger of Allah, the messenger of God, the most beautiful example of conduct, right? And this is in every single facet. It just doesn't mean how to be a good husband, how to be a good father, how to be a good nephew, how to be a good friend. All these are important. It also means how to bring about positive transformation in society and to block harm that would seek to injure the souls, the minds, if we want to use the term minds, and the physical bodies of creatures, the human being at the peak of those creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So that would be what makes activism sacred. But a Muslim can be involved in activism and they could have a righteous objective, but use irreverent means. So those irreverent means would be profane if they don't factor in the sacred law or the ethics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Then that's not sacred activism. Likewise, someone could say that um, they're a Mr. or Mrs. Spiritual and righteous, and they have the ability or the capacity to block some sort of harm, right? Or to speak out of a certain harm without even a lot of risk. And they sit back and watch it foment and get worse in society. That's not being so-called spiritual either, right? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned us about this too, in a hadith, Rawahu Muslim, and Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anh. It's very famous. We all know it. It's in the Arba'in of Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala. If any of you sees a munkar, and the munkar basically means something which is unjust and unwholesome or immoral, right? If any one of you see something unjust and immoral, you change it bi yadi, if you have the authority. And if you don't have the authority, not able to do it, then change it bi lisani. Then you're obligated to speak out against it. And if you if you feel like you can't speak out against it, then resist it in your heart. But be qalbihi wa dhalika adaful iman. He says, but if you're able to speak out against it, and you just feel bad about it in your heart, he says that's the weakest of faith. Like that's a person of low iman, right? So we as spirituality or being spiritual and being a Sufi, right? If someone wants to use the term Sufi, a true Sufi doesn't aim for the lowest level, right? They aim for the highest level. That's Ihsan, right? And that also relates to how people deal with things in society. And I have to say that because some people have a misunderstanding of thinking that spirituality, you just sit back and just be quiet with tyrants and be apolitical and just sit in the cave and do dhikr and be patient with the unjust ruler. I mean, our forefathers who resisted the French and the British in West Africa, they were all Sufis and they didn't think that way, right? They didn't, Hajj Umar Futi El Tal didn't think that way. Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio didn't think that way. Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba didn't think that way. Or even in the late 19th century, early 20th century, Sidi Ahmed ibn Sadiq al-Ghumari, Ash-Shadali in Morocco, he didn't think that way, right? So that's not what Omar Mukhtar in Libya, I could go on and on and on. Like they didn't understand tasawwuf to be you just sit back and don't challenge the ruler or just sit in your Abu Hassan Ash-Shadali, like he confronted the Crusaders, right? So I mean, it's that's not what uh, being spiritual is about. So sorry if I went on a little long about that, but I really had to clarify that because some people have how they understand tasawwuf is not really Sufism, it's really goofyism. It's goofy.
No, Sheikh, mashallah is beautiful, because it brings me to the question. Like, first of all, the points that you bring are very wonderful to hear and things that I don't think most people know, right? Like a lot of those names people may not be familiar with. These are great ulama throughout history. You guys should look them up. These luminaries who, mashallah, great biographies who've done great things for the ummah. A lot of people, when people, like I know somebody who, in our modern day, we have that paradigm, right? You have those who are more on the Salafiyah side. Then you have those who are on the Sufi side, right? And then in the middle, you have most of the Muslimin, at least in terms of what people identify in the general population, right? And I was talking to somebody who they seem to lean more towards the side of at-tasawwuf, the Sufi side. However, what's the best way to put it? They also had something against Sufism, right? And it was that thing of goofyism because in their country, right, the tyrants they believed use Sufism to keep the people very latent, very dull, right? Like the people would say, don't say anything, just go do 10,000 la ilaha illallah, do 1,000 salatul fatis, just do these different things, be there, don't argue, don't push back. But these great luminaries you've given examples for, they fought, right? Now, I want to push back on you a little bit just to be a contrarian, right? So let's say I'm a young person today. I'm like 22 years old, or let's say 19, right? Like a lot of the protesters, very young, college age, right? And okay, I'm hearing you say that I need to learn before I can go be active, right? Or I'm hearing you say it's best to learn the sacred law to some degree or have some sacred like guidance on the sacred law. However, you're also giving me examples of people who moved forward. Now, if I have a rage inside of me and I see something happening, right, and this hadith about seeing a munkar, right, like how do I rectify the two? What if I'm like, it's taking too long? It'll take me forever to learn these books. I don't even understand Arabic. What are you saying, right? What would you say to somebody who says that shit?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, everything in Islam has shurut, meaning it has conditions, right? So, in order for one to be able to pray, they have to learn properly the conditions of first tahara, like what makes someone ritually impure. How do you get ritually impure? Under what circumstances does that necessitate uh, wudu or ghusl or a tayammum, etc.? What breaks that and what constitutes such and such? Then you need to know the conditions of like prayer, like where can you pray? What should you be wearing, right? Uh, if something is soiled, what soils even the clothing if your body's covered properly? That's not pure, right? Then what must be said of the wajibat or the what's mafrud before what is mamdud? What are the recommendations of the sunnah parts of the prayer sunnah, right? That has to be learned in order to have proper prayer. It's the same thing for zakah. It's the same thing for siyam, for fasting the month of Ramadan, which is coming up soon. It's the same thing for hajj. Just like these five pillars, bunya al-islam al-khams. This is Islam is established upon five. Everything in Islam has these prerequisites. And joining good and forbidding evil also has prerequisites according to Islamic scholars. So, of the first of those is one must have basic knowledge of what is mahruf and what is munkar according to what they are going to advocate in favor of and be against. And this requires knowledge in the sacred law, based some basic knowledge of the sacred law on that which is going to be advocated for. Then also the adab of the mannerisms and the means must also be known, that what conforms according to the sacred law and to prophetic ethics. This has to be known, and this is why many of the scholars say that if one does not know or is not clear about the mahruf or the munkar they are advocating for or against, then the baseline is sukut. Be quiet and don't move, right? Because it's very possible two things. Number one, if a person does not understand the basics of the sacred law and what they're going to advocate for, number one, in the name of trying to do good, they could accumulate sins for themselves. Number two, as Sayyidina Ali said, Karamallahu ta'ala wajhu radiallahu an, aduun akhal khayran min sadiqin jahil. The intelligent adversary is better than the ignorant ally. So a person in their ignorance could do more long-term harm to their cause, being sincerely wrong, right? And I've seen this. I've seen this on many issues. I've seen this with some of the activism regarding Palestine, for instance. I've seen this, right? So this is an example. The other thing, Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, he has a book that he wrote called Mizan al-Amal. It's one of the first books on Islamic ethics. It's literally translated is the balance of action. It is the balance of action. So anything we have a balance, you have to the right and to the left. So Imam Ghazali would say about virtue, i'tidal wasatu bain al-ifrat wa tafrit. that that which is just and moderate is in the middle between excess and negligence. Excess and negligence. El ifrat is excess, el tafrit is deficiency or negligence, right? So this relates to anger. We see something. Righteous indignation is a good thing. If we did not have any righteous indignation, right, then we would not have any sense of ghaira to protect ourselves or that which is important to us. So that's a good thing. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told one of the companions, we asked for this, a specific companion asked for some advice. He told him, La taghdab, la taghdab, la taghdab. Do not be enraged. Do not be angry. Do not be enraged, right? So if we don't have temperaments and are acting off of knowledge, if we act out of haste, out of anger, without knowledge, that becomes blameworthy rage. And that is el ifrat. That will cause us to collect sins. And that blameworthy anger is like fire. It will burn away hasanat and it will burn away khair. And fighting fire with fire causes a greater fire. To the negligence is when someone has no righteous indignation or anger whatsoever, and they allow themselves to be humiliated, and they lose all dignity and all honor. And that is blameworthy, to sit back and just take indignities and disrespect and to not speak up or stand for oneself when you are able to, and just sit back and just take it, right? I mean, subhanAllah, even when there was no political power, you could see Sayyidina Bilal, and he refused to give in. He said, Ahadun Ahad, right? And he kept his dignity, even though the rocks were crushing him on the desert sand of Arabia. Ahadun Ahad, right? That was the way he resisted. He didn't sit back and just take it, you see? So this is why I say to people that say, oh, we have to act. And in all ways, too, in this process, and I do this right now, and I've been involved in this work for a long time, I seek mashura and advice, including from elders. I have a murabbi. I check in with people, right? So even when those of us who have studied a little bit, we still have to go back to our elders for review and also ask questions. But we have no Islam is not a religion or a deen for freestyling, my brothers and sisters. That's the point. So you young brothers and sisters who see things, it's not just freestyling, right? Like, we have Islam is built around Islam represents al ahkam, that we have rules and regulations in deen. It's not just feelings and it's not just theology. We have rules that regulate our limbs and how we act in the world.
Subhanallah. This is great stuff. It's very eye opening because it puts things into context. A lot of where things may have went wrong during the times we have been active, right, as young people doing activism work, right, and the issues we may have ran into. Now, Sheikh, I would ask you, right? Okay, what is this? If somebody may ask, okay, when you say the sacred law, right, are you just referring to al-fiqh? Are you referring to usul fiqh? Are you referring to tasawwuf, aqidah? Like, what are you referring to when you say the sacred law? And how much of each should somebody pick up, right? How much of each should I get 25% fiqh here, 15% aqidah, 25% tasawwuf? Like, what is somebody you think they're supposed to get? Like, what is that relationship between the spirituality and the concept of justice also?
Okay, so all the sciences of Islam are intertwined. We don't separate them and say that they have no relationship. There's correlationship between the three basic sciences of Islam. But when I'm saying the sacred law, I'm talking about the Sharia, the final sacred law revealed to Al-Habib Mustafa Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Fiqh is nothing but a vehicle of trying to understand that Sharia. And in this sense, many of the things that we're talking about from the side of activism for the most part, there is agreement upon amongst the madhab. So we're not talking about issues of ikhtilafat, right? Because even in the general things of the sacred law, there is agreement, and on some of the minor things, there can be differences. For instance, the Quran says, "Aqimu salah," establish the prayer, right? All Muslims believe in prayer and the 5 daily prayers. Now, this command is called mujmal, like it's general, right? The specifics, this is where fiqh comes in, right? So some people, starting with the takbirat, do they put their hands here? Do they put them here? Do not raise them at all. Do they have their hands to the side, below, hands folded, right over left below the belly button, or above the navel, right? These are the small particulars, right? But the basis of the prayer, for instance, is the same. This is likewise when we're trying to meet objectives within the sacred law. Now, the tartib, or the order of what should be learned, is based upon the report that we've been given is hadith mutawatir, but in particular, and by mutawatir, we say a hadith that narrate by 10 or more sahaba. May Allah be pleased with them, right? This is how As-Suyuti, Jalaluddin As-Suyuti, defined the Tawatur report, right? 10 or more people. So in one of the riwayah by Umar bin Khattab, Al-Khalifa Thani, the second caliph, he narrates, and this is in Sahih al-Bukhari, and this is normally mentioned in a couple of different orders, but this particular order is important. He said that in Hadith Jibreel, we know Jibreel came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was in the Masjid Nabawi. There's a door there now called Bab Jibreel, literally where Jibreel walked in, looking like a man, and a group of companions were sitting there, no less than 10 were sitting with him, alayhi salam. Omar was one of them. Okay. Uh, Abu Huraira is one of them. So we're talking about the latter part of this is important. We're talking about the latter years of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like Abu Huraira was there, Ibn Abbas was there, right? We're talking about which he was one of the younger companions. So the angel asked the Prophet alayhi salam 3 questions. In this particular tartib order, he says, "What is faith? Mel Iman." Then, what is El Islam? And the third is, what is El Ihsan? Scholars say that El Iman in this particular order represents the first thing we should learn, and that is what is the basic beliefs that one must have to have them in the fold of Islam. Believe that God is one, right? And there's no partners or associations, right? And we have to believe in all the books and all the angels, right? And all of the prophets. We believe in the day of resurrection, right? These are things that someone must believe in order to be a Muslim, right? And in these general things, there are certain specific things that be learned, and this is known as El Aqidah. Aqidah. So El Iman represents Aqidah. This is the first thing we have to study, and starting with Tawheed, right? Also, Nubuwah is an important part of this because the oneness of God and His authority has to be understood properly to then understand prophecy and prophetic authority, right? Then, what is Islam? This is basically the 5 pillars. So, this represents Al Ahkam because for these pillars, there are rulings and rules that regulate uh, how we do things, right? So, for Salah, a condition of Salah is Tahara. So, there's wudu, how to make prayers, what invalidates prayers, etc. This is the second thing to learn, right? Then the third is what is El Ihsan? And the Prophet ﷺ said, worshiping Allah as if you see Allah. And if you do not see Allah, know that Allah sees you. Right? Our scholars say that this represents the third science of Islam that is known as Ilm Suluk, or is known as Tazkiyatun Nafs, or at Tasawwuf, right? Which means in order to see Allah with one's heart, is to empty out virtue, to fill is to empty out vice to fill with virtue so that those virtues can manifest, right? Tahliya, tahliya, tajliya, right? Emptying out, filling in, and then bringing forth, right? These are the three sciences of Islam, right? So all of these work together in synergy, but proper belief has to be established first. So for instance, if one has proper belief and know that Allah is the creator, Allah doesn't make any mistakes, and Allah is a lawgiver, then one can come up with the false notion that there's such a thing called gender fluidity, or like there's like 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 different genders. No, Allah is the creator. He said there's a dhakar, a male, and an untha, right? This is an issue of al-aqidah. It's not an issue of fiqh, of law, right? For instance, right? Allah, to establish Allah's authority. He's a creator, he's a lawgiver, right? Um, so that's not even a halal or haram issue. That's an issue of aqidah, right? For instance, so so-called gender fluidity, non-gender conforming, it's an issue of el-aqidah, right? That has to be established first, right? And then we have the issue of the sacred law, but it all intertwines.
Allah. Okay. So Akida first, guys. Fiqh. And then a tasawwuf or taskiyah, however people want to label it, right? Okay. Now, Sheikh, to go back to the question of how much of each should like somebody learn like a book, 2 books, 3 books, and then should they learn the Arabic language as well to go? Like the point I'm trying to get to is to be a contrarian, right? Is those people who want to be active and they see this injustice, like in their fitrah, they're just Allah made some people that this is just what they're extremely passionate about, and they want to get active. They want to do something. It feels like it's a prerequisite, but how long is the prerequisite? Is what I'm asking.
Okay. If a person is truly trying to serve Allah, like the activism shouldn't be for the nefs or for the ego. Or it shouldn't just be to quench some sort of anger or like desire to see something. It should be done for the sake of Allah. If a person's doing that and beginning to learn, they can be involved in activism as long as they are holding the hand of someone, as long as they are following leadership, as long as they have some sort of guidance that is guiding them, who is grounded in the sacred law and the facts on the ground. No problem. Like everyone doesn't need to be, we can say, an advanced student of knowledge. However, we should not seek to be mediocre, right? So I would say for all Muslims, just as it is taught, as beginning students of knowledge in West Africa, that okay, for beginning students of knowledge, there's a hadith called there's the book the hadith al alawiyah, right? Uh, but for serious studying, hadith Jibreel that I just went over, there should be a deep dive in those basic components of what a Muslim must believe in and some sort of understanding of the of the of some of the particulars, right? So literally, if someone is studious and sits with a proper teacher, right, they can go over at least the first part of Hadith Jibreel. If they went to an all like a 3-day weekend workshop, they could go over there to get basically a tahdhib or mukhtasar of the basic beliefs in Islam in a 3-day workshop. If they took notes and were paying attention. So we're not talking about someone, needing to go and get a bachelor's degree or going to go to El Azhar or Qarawiyyin in Morocco or going to, Tiwawan in Senegal. We're not talking about that, right? But there has to be some basic study. But the point of it is mentorship, right? And um, being willing and humble to be able to take guidance from mentorship and from leaders. And if I can point to something in the Quran, The surah that's recommended to read every Yom al-Jum'ah is Surah Al-Kahf. It's the 18th chapter, right? And right before the very end, it talks about Dhul Qarnayn. There's a story of Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam finds an elder, and he's a young man, and he actively seeks, tarbiyah from this murshid. His name is not mentioned in the Quran explicitly, but in the hadith, we know him as Al-Khidr alayhi salam, right? And he sought out a spiritual guide, and he himself was hasty in questioning his guide and found out that he was wrong in three particular questions he was interrogating him about. But the lesson of it is this: Musa went through this tarbiyah before he went back to Egypt to enjoying good and forbid evil to Fir'aun. Musa was a prophet. He was visited by an angel. He was given a book, and he had a sheikh. Now, none of us are prophets. You young brothers and sisters watching this, you're not a prophet. You're not getting a new book revealed to you. And probably Mikael and Mikael and Jibreel and the other angels aren't coming to sit down with you to have a one-on-one chat, right? So uh since he needed that, and none of us are getting the book and having one-on-one sit downs of coffee with Jibreel alayhi salam. And by the way, angels don't eat or drink, but I'm just saying this, like, as an example, right? Then we would be foolish to think that we don't need any guidance or any mentorship. Like it's literally it's self-delusion. And really, if any one of us thinks that, we have been deceived by Iblis. I will go that far. And even the people Tasawwuf say, whoever does not have a sheikh, then shaitan becomes your sheikh, right? Because then you're just going off your own nefs, your own ego. Su ego es no su amigo. You see?
So Sheikh, that's a great point you bring up then, right? So now it's like, okay, I know the people who are activists who like to be activists, like, man, this dude giving us too long of a checklist, man. I gotta learn fiqh, I gotta learn this, I gotta but
That's
it's
what
all
I
great
did.
stuff. Alhamdulillah, right?
You
So
know?
how does one go about, and when you say a mentor, do you mean a mentor as far as any of the sciences, or just somebody you can learn all of it from, or a spiritual mentor? Because you have some people, they have murabbis, right? And some people, they don't even know what that is, right? Can you explain what that is, and how does somebody
Yeah.
find that? Or is it just like you just have your imam at the masjid, he's your mentor?
No, so all imams, there's different types of imams, but very few people are what we call a complete sheikh. So there are sheikhain. There are two types of sheikhs, we can say, if we can put a little English language on the term sheikh. But there's two types of sheikhs, and then there's a third time that they're rare, the complete sheikh. The first type is sheikh al ta'lim. This is a sheikh that can give you academic, guidance, that can teach you the basics of al aqidah, that can teach you the basics of fiqh, like the fiqh of madhab maliki, for instance. Uh, he teach you those things, and this person, gives khutbah as a prayer leader. Okay, uh, that could be a sheikh al ta'lim. Sheikh at Tarbiyah is something else. This is someone who's gone through a certain type of rearing and has sat at the feet and gone through training of the scholars or the people of inward spiritual warfaring, right? And these are people that you take from their hal, their spiritual state, and their adab and akhlaq. And much of this is not through instruction or tadris, it is through watching them, getting corrected from them from time to time, and service to them, khidmah, khidmah, doing service for them. Kind of like what Musa alayhi salam did with his murshid. Then you have the complete sheikh who has both of these together, right? Most people that we call imams in America, most of them would fit the first category, if they've actually studied, right? They would fit the first category. And if those are traditional shuyukh, most of them are imams, most of them will have a murabbi or a sheikh themselves, someone that they are checking in with, someone that's helping raise them up, that they are getting advice from, right? So I have one, for instance. And I just turned 54 years old not long ago. So the point is, every sheikh has a sheikh. Like, don't think that you're beyond that point, right? Um, then there's also mentorship then of people who are in the field doing certain things, right? So for instance, even if you have a complete sheikh, the sheikh can guide you on the basic principles of the sacred law and on ethics, but he will not know the particulars of every single issue, right? So, will Sheikh Fulan bin Fulan, okay, I'll use an example. Someone who I've sat with and studied with who is a Sheikh of Ta'lim and a Sheikh of Tarbiyah, Sheikh Muhammad bin Yahya Ninawi,
Mhm.
who's based in Georgia. He's an immigrant from Syria, okay? He's someone that who is a Murabbi or complete Sheikh, right? In my estimation. Um, but does he know about all of the ins and outs of the history of indigenous rights and the Keystone Pipeline and and native reservations and the smallpox situation and General Custard, or does he know about the history of Asia and the syphilis experiment of Tuskegee and mass incarceration of black folk and the civil rights laws that inform those? Um, he might, but probably not. You probably want to go to a mentor who's older in the field to know the particulars on those specific issues. If you're going to advocate on those particular issues, that you have to also check with the specialists and the mentors who've walked through these things. Number one, because everything's not gotten in a book, and that's particular experience. And one mistake I've seen where people they think they have bright ideas. Oh, let's do this, do this. They don't know that other people tried the exact same thing and didn't work, and they don't know why it didn't work. Right. So we keep continuously repeating the wheel, like, oh, well, that generation, they didn't know what we're doing. We got the new and improved understand now. We got AI now. Right. I'm just using that as an example, right? Well, people repeat the mistakes that people have done in the past. But if you check in and you walk with other people, you'll see that, okay, well, people did this back in the day and it led to this result, right? People did this type of radical activism and people, because they got baited by Asian provocateurs. It's led to these people getting killed and these people being exiled. And it calls for this movement to be broken up because people were sloppy in doing certain things and certain behaviors. So don't do that. Don't speak that way. Don't be careful about dealing with these people and these people, right? You need people with experience for stuff like that. And that takes mentorship.
Subhanallah, subhanallah. Sheikh, I want to dive deeper, but I do want to hit some other stuff as we're approaching like the ending of the discussion. And jazakallah khair for the information you're sharing. I do want to touch on two quick things, of course. The first thing I want to touch on, I want to take it there a little bit. In regards to Palestine, right?
Yeah.
And keep in mind, I love Palestine, and may Allah give tawfiq to the people of Palestine and the
I mean,
ummah at large. I mean, I did a 2-hour podcast with Muslim American Society and American Muslims for Palestine on the history of it and everything of that nature. So I'm not against Palestine, right? There's no way against them. However, one thing I noticed is when the issue of Palestine came up, it was like a gravitas. The whole ummah was pushing together. I mean, you seen people posting, people going rapid and just doing their best effort to like really get people aware. And it had a great impact on the society, right? For better or worse. Now, the question I have is when it comes to other issues, in particular, like, for example, like the Sudan issue that's happening, and may Allah grant tawfiq to the people of Sudan and the Ummah at large as well. why is it that you feel we have deaf ears when it comes to this particular issue? And now, me personally, I'm not gonna go and be one of those people who say all of the other Muslims are racist because it's something dealing with African Muslims,
Well,
right?
that's a
Like,
part of it, though. That's a part of it.
I'm not gonna say all of them, right? But I'm gonna let you go ahead and just take that. And what do you think is the reason that it's fallen on deaf ears when it's a crisis, numbers wise? More people are being, unfortunately, losing their lives there in comparison to Palestine. I'm not saying that you should compare bloodshed at all, but they're both major crises, and we've seen outcry for one, but the other is kind of.
Well, I'll say this. Number one, um, s- we have many crises in the Muslim world, but the longest standing grievance that we've had in the Ummah, in, we could say the past 4 generations, has been the occupation of that land and the lack of religious freedom for Muslims to be able to freely worship in El Masjid Al Aqsa, which is mentioned in the Quran, by the way, right? And the Isra Mi'raj, majority opinion of scholars say that happened in the month of Rajab that we are in right now, one of the 4 sacred months. So El Masjid Al Aqsa in that particular land, the Holy Land, as well as like Masjid Ibrahimi, which is in El Khalil, known as Hebron. Um, these are very important symbols. They are of the sha'air of El Islam. They are of the sacred symbols of Islam, right? And out of all of the uh, fitan in the Muslim world and bloodshed, this is the longest standing one. Kashmir, the occupation of Kashmir of India would be number two, but even the Muslims in Kashmir have not been slaughtered anywhere to the numbers of Palestinians, right? Especially we're talking about in the last couple of decades. So I would say that's one thing, right? The second thing is how the American Muslim community has been organized. After the Civil Rights Act of 1965 and the growth of Muslims in the United States of America, where slowly, now the majority of Muslims in America are not African Americans. It used to be in the 70s going to the 80s, the majority of Muslims in America were African Americans by far, right? Starting with I mean, you had other people who were in movements like Sheikh Tawfiq, like at MIB, when Imam Wafdi Muhammad Rahimullah Ta'ala took the people out of the nation in 1975 to mainstream Islam and others. And then the growth of the Tijaniya and the cultivation of Sheikh Hassan Sise in places like Detroit and then also in New York, Harlem, and these things, Rahimullah Ta'ala. But you had in 1965 you had the Immigration Act, and then shortly then you had the MSA that then morphed to ISNA, and you had other organizations that came after it, ICNA.
It's no, that's here in Indianapolis.
Yeah, you had ICNA, then the Muslim American Society, and these things, right? Those organizations, people had a particular political slant, and that particular political slant focused and prioritized Palestine as basically the number one issue, right? And then also other charities that grew out from that. I mean, the Holy Land Foundation was closed down, but Islamic Relief and all these things, many of their origins of the top issues they talked about and centered from those institutions was Palestine. So when you have these big national organizations that start off that way, and that's always been the focal point, and as they've grown over the decades, and as more people have come into Islam and been influenced those primarily through birth of being the grandchildren of these people, even some great grandchildren these days, then you can see how if other issues, um, I mean, I I haven't heard much talk about all the Muslims who were being killed in the Congo, for instance,
It's another place. May Allah
or the
grant them
places like
tawfiq.
that, or Sudan, and that's because um, that's because, that's not been a top priority. Now, the third part of it that I say is racism. I asked Sheikh Mohammed Majid this. May Allah preserve him. He's
Mhm.
Sudanese. He's the Imam of the Adams Center in Northern Virginia. And I asked him, I said, Sheikh, he's Sudanese. I said, Sheikh, I said, why do you think that there's been, at the time, there's more people that were killed in Sudan than in Gaza, but we call Gaza a genocide, right? And actually, the amount of women who were sexually assaulted in Sudan, especially Darfur, is staggering. And it's not simply a tribal war, by the way. There's outside forces that have been stealing gold, like blood diamonds, Sierra Leone's blood gold, without mentioning the countries, two particular countries, one not Muslim and one Muslim, that have been actively involved in arming and stealing gold. I asked him, I said, why is it that you think that um, people aren't talking about Sudan like Palestine? He's like, shaking on the reason why. I said, why? He said, because we're black. He
Yeah.
said, because we're black. And the reality of it is that there is a de facto hierarchy of importance of certain issues. And I was talking to my staffers about the day that, many people would not know that, like, the majority religion on the African continent is Islam, and not just North Africa. We're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, right? There's more Muslims in Nigeria, the entire population of Egypt. And Egypt is the largest the largest Arab country. There's more Muslims in northern Nigeria. There's more Muslims than the entirety of Egypt. And Egypt is the largest Arab, country, right? So when people think of the Ummah, they think of Syria. They don't think of Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traore, right? They think about Iran. They don't think about Tanzania, uh, right? People think Egypt. They don't think Nigeria. I could keep going on. People think Kashmir. They don't think Senegal. So that's just something in the uh, it's a type of erasure. Because if we all believe that we're one ummah and we have people from these countries in our community actively, including scholars, by the way, you know, uh, the former head of ISNA, Dr. Noor, was Sudanese. Sheikh Sheikh Abdullah Idris, who used to be the head of ISNA, is Sudanese. Right? They've had two different secretary generals and presidents that have been Sudanese, right? And I'm not like trying to throw shade on ISNA. May Allah bless those brothers. I mean, they invite me to speak at their conference, and I'm not going to be able to speak. The upcoming ISNA conference is going to be in Detroit. I'm not going to be here for it. But my point of it is, I'm just trying to paint a picture of like why that is. And it's not to cry. It is just to say that um, if some of us who are not of those organizations, orientations, lift up other issues and don't say Palestine or bust, we shouldn't be blamed for that, right? If we have different priorities. Like, I've never been affiliated with any of those, organizations, and I kind of get like why they're like that. And I'm not trying to talk anyone I'm not trying to talk any of those organizations and changing their platform. Like, I told my staffers, like, you don't expect to harvest mangoes from an apple tree. Like, there's an apple seed that was planted in a certain soil, and it was planted to produce apples. So why do you expect mangoes? Like, ISNA and MAS and ICNA were established upon certain understandings, catering to a certain group of people and a certain socioeconomic background of certain ethnicities with a certain political orientation or orientations. So why get mad with them if they're sticking by what they were established upon? I'm not mad with them. Doesn't mean I have to agree with them or I can't take another stance. So for those of you, who disagree, then, we can respectfully disagree with their priorities and we can talk about other issues. And hence, that's why I wrote the book Blackness in Islam. And part of that was to try to break out of that cycle and try to focus on or center a narrative that basically has been erased. So, my goal has never been black nationalism, right? Like I'm not a black nationalist, but what I'm not in favor of is black erasure or ignoring black folk, much less active anti-black racism, which I think most of it is not anti-black racism, but um, I do think that, you know, unconsciously, the issues of Muslims who are black throughout the diaspora are relegated as not being as important. I've been working in this community for a long time, and I can even see it in organizations' press releases. What they talk about with politicians. It's a little more than just anecdotal, right? I could do a qualitative analysis and clearly show and prove what I'm saying.
Subhanallah. It's
No, excuse me, not qualitative, quantitative. I could do a
quantitative.
quantitative.
Subhanallah.
I could do a quantitative analysis and clearly show and back up what I'm talking about. I don't talk recklessly, right? I don't talk recklessly.
Subhanallah. Shaykh, I want to go deeper into this, but we are about to get to the end. I do want you to speak
We
briefly
can do
about
another
your new
time,
book.
inshallah.
Inshallah. I'm happy you beat me to the punch. Inshallah, because there's much more to talk about. But yeah, Sheikh, please briefly tell us about your new book and how people can get it, what it's about, and where people can reach the book at.
Okay, so my new book is called Islamic Metaphysics of Racism, and it was released about 2 months ago. Islamic Human Rights Commission. It's on their website. It was published by Algorithm Press. It's based in the UK, in London. The book is basically a conclusion that I came to that racism cannot be legislated and adjudicated away on its own, or it cannot be sufficiently addressed only through laws and court cases in society. And reason being is racism is nothing but symptoms of diseases of the heart. And you can't legislate arrogance out of someone's heart. You can't legislate envy out of someone's heart. You can't legislate rage and hatred out of someone's heart. Those take spiritual medicines or remedies for those spiritual maladies. So what the book does is um, it defines racism from an Islamic perspective, right? That racism is a branch of al-asabiyya, or the blameworthy group fanaticism. Some say tribalism and group fanaticism, because there can be ta'assub and madhab, right? There can be ta'assub relating to gender. There can be the ta'assub relating to tribe, ethnicity, race. So it defines it from a sunnah perspective. Then I go into different diseases and showing their social political manifestations of those different diseases relating to racism. Then I give the knowledge cure and the action cure. And this is something common within a tasawwuf. And Sheikh, uh, I reference in it Sheikh Uthman Danfodio, also known as Sheikh Uthman bin Fudi, the Qadri, a Nigerian Fulani political leader and scholar. Ilaj Ilmi wa Ilaj Amali, the knowledge cure and the action cure for each disease. For the active races. Then also there are knowledge and action cures relationship to those who have suffered racism long term or intergenerationally, because people can suffer from long term grief and fear. They can be involved in self loathing. Self loathing is an issue of the heart. When you think that other people are better than you are, or that your oppressor is like what Malcolm says, that you can have some ice and a white man's can have ice, and someone can think the white man's ice is colder, right? That's type of self-loathing, or some people call it internalized oppression. Then there's also the issue of blameworthy rage, which people who suffered racism can go into blameworthy rage in addressing the racism, right? So each one of those, there's also like balm that's spiritual, right? Of knowledge and action for soothing, for healing. So the racist, he or she needs spiritual remedies, and the victim of racism, the victims need spiritual healing, right? And sometimes those aren't mutually exclusive identities. A person can be a racist and be a victim of racism. Like someone could be an Arab who suffers anti-Arab racism and also be an anti-black racist at the same time. Like that, they're not mutually exclusive. Someone can be a victim of racism, they can be madloom and be dhalim at the same time. So, uh, we so this is what the book talks about. So we go through those diseases and deficiencies and cures. So, I mentioned those arrogance. So we're looking at the books of tasawwuf and akhlaq to address these things, or we could say metaphysics. Um, the arrogance, envy. We can talk compound ignorance, grief of the past, being arrested by fear of the future, self-loathing, inferiority complexes, blameworthy rage. So that's what Islamic metaphysics of racism is talking about. And I can also say, um, if I can also mention this, it's a subtle response to people who would look at critical race theory as something beyond a legal remedy, but look at it as a type of theory of social change. It's an answer or a subtle critique of that, because any theory of change that is purely materialistic or secular in orientation will either be wanting or lacking in something and deficient, and or can unintentionally cause harm. Right. So critical race theory is fine in deconstructing certain things, but it's not the answer. It's definitely not a spiritual cure for anything that we're talking about, especially what we need as Black folk.
Sheikh, where can I get the book at?
You can go to IHRC's website. Unfortunately, I think that I did the audio book for that, and so it should be out anytime soon, and also the digital book should be out. The hard copy book is out. The only problem with IHRC is that it is based in London, which means you're paying more shipping and handling for the book. So if you were to get the book, I would suggest to cut down on the shipping prices, maybe buy like 3 copies instead of buying 1 copy, to have that 1 copy sent across the sea. But you can check on IHRC's website, Islamic Human Rights Commission, and just type in my name in IHRC, and they'll bring up a page with all of my books, like Blackness in Islam. The second edition of Towards Sacred Activism is on there. My book, Fatwa and Raising Males of Sacred Manhood. Though the Fatwa book and the Blackness in Islam, those can be purchased in America, like at Mecca Books or at uh, 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 Imam Ghazali Institute, or even Amazon if you want to, uh, spend money with them. But it costs more on Amazon. That's where you can get those books from.
Inshallah, brothers and sisters, listen, investing in ilm, any type of thing, it may seem like it's a lot, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. I believe it's a quote by Imam Shafi. I might be wrong. I think he said he spent what 2/3 of his wealth on Arabic, and he wished he had spent the last third of it on Arabic. I could be misquoting it. Either way, spending your money towards gaining knowledge is something that is beloved in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it'll benefit you in this life and in the next life, right? Because I mean, what you gonna do? Pay for Netflix all day, right? And just watch something. So Jazakallah khair to the Imam. Thank you very much, Sheikh. We appreciate you. Before you get off, two things. Where can the people find you at your socials? YouTube, your YouTube page, or however they can reach you. Website.
Um, if you go to YouTube and just type in my name, you can find my YouTube page. As far as any other social media, I divested from anti-social media over 5 years ago. I found to be too toxic, but you can find I'm on Telegram as well. So if you look up Telegram, you can find I have a Telegram page, and I can be contacted. My email is on there. So if anyone wants to send me a message on Telegram, or they can email me at d.walid.speaks@gmail.com. Then my administrator checks those emails. Uh, but I can be contacted. But it's YouTube and Telegram are the two ways that they can, anyone can follow, what I'm up to, inshallah.
Well, yeah, please check out the Sheikh. Um, so I have this thing I do. Uh, yeah, Iman. Before we get off, it's the last thing, of course. What's something, and typically I tell people what's something a ayat or a sunnah you would recommend for people to follow so we collect sadaqah jariyah, right? But inshallah, what's something of spirituality that people can practice today that can help them clean their hearts and start this process?
Mm. The best thing I would say is to try to find one deed, khabiyah, one deed that is secret that you try to do that only you know and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And fix a time that when you do it, that no one knows. It could be daily, one particular deed. It could be once a week. Maybe you pick Jummah day, but pick a certain regular time. It's almost like a type of like a weird, like a litany, but it's in deed. It's not like in dhikr of the tongue. It's like it's a dhikr of action. And this is a way of us trying to renew and keep our ikhlas, to keep our sidq, like our sincerity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So find one small deed. You don't tell anyone that you do it. Not your husband, not your wife, not your mom or dad or children, siblings, your friends. You don't tell anyone. You keep it a secret. And that is that's everything starts with the intention, and that's the beginning of the affair of a as we were taught by Sheikh Muhammad ibn Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, the son of the great Sufi Sheikh. That sidq is the first stage of truthfulness, right? Of If we look at truthfulness having three darajat, or three stages, then the truthfulness in the intention, that's the beginning of the affairs of the matters.
So, brothers and sisters, there you go. You have it. Please pick one thing you do at a certain time. Don't tell anybody. Just get to doing it. Inshallah, this is your secret between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, brothers and sisters, that's it for the episode. Please subscribe and share. If you don't subscribe, at least please share the message. That's the biggest thing. We want to just get knowledge out there to the people. Subscribing helps the message and the cause, but spreading the message is the biggest thing. Pray Allah forgives us for our sins and accepts.